I suppose we need to understand Egypt. That's something that has been playing on my mind a little bit, because Egypt is very popular amongst those who rule the world, or people in positions of power anyway. And we saw all the exploration and the tomb raiding that went on apparently in the 1800s, was it? And then the curse of a particular tomb and all the mythology that surrounds Egypt. It seems to almost be the center of the narrative that is pushed, I suppose, or that we hear in our lives. You could say also I believe the American dollar has a pyramid on it, and then there's the whole capstone and the pyramid thing. It's in my mind because, of course, I was speaking of a private pyramid. Apparently, there are now two I've discovered, and the newcomer pyramid is larger and will accommodate, more people. I don't know, a small group, I suppose. But are pyramids powerful? This is, this is something that we need to establish. And are they in themselves wicked? Is there something evil about that geometrical shape? I think that's not really likely, but I suppose you could say that every organization in the world is a pyramid in terms of its authority structure. And pyramids don't seem to go well, and I think, it's nowhere more evident than in the church, because the group of initiates or devotees and the preacher and the deacon and the elders, they become a power that can't really be questioned or opposed. They don't go and sit at the back of the church, as I think they should do, periodically, and just participate and let some other man or come up to the front and address the assembly. I think they should spend most of their time at the back of the church, really, until they're called up. Isn't that the system? So, a pyramid is problematic on Earth, but, our Lord and Saviour is the King of Kings, and you could say that a kingdom can be a sort of a pyramid in a way, because in a traditional kingdom you'd have the nobles, I suppose, wouldn't you, and the extended royal family and the honour or dishonour that accrues to them. So would that be a godly pyramid, the one that emanates down from the royal family, if, of course, the royal family is righteous? I think it would be in that case. I think that's perfectly fine, because we all have our stations in life, don't we? And not all of us are set out to be counselors or judges or rulers. Somebody said the people who are least willing to do those jobs would make the best candidates, and I think there's truth in that indeed. It's our ambition, isn't it, and our self-importance that get in the way sometimes. But the matter of pyramids is interesting also, because it's not just in Egypt that we find them. I was reminded of this by my Indian friend the other day, and I was talking about this. He had some interesting perspectives to share, and he pointed out that pyramids are have been found all over the world and exist all over the world. And he was quoting dates, which I don't know whether I completely agree with, but it's suggesting that they were very old indeed. Whereas I've heard it said that the Egyptian pyramids are fairly recent in construction. That's a conspiracy theory, of course, and can't be proven. But the theory is out there. I think one of the reasons that they say it is because early depictions of the pyramids show a different shape, quite different. And then you've also got mentions, haven't you, throughout history of the pyramids. I don't believe they're mentioned in the Bible, whereas they would have been standing there for, 1,000 years or something, or 2,000 years. I don't know when. Do they say they're 4,000 years old or longer? They don't make an appearance there. But it is true that they, you can find them all over. I think that's, can't be questioned. And so the whole thing leads into the kind of architecture that you can indeed find, because it's not just a pyramid, as it were, despite its geometrical accuracy in many cases and its perfect alignment with the lights in the firmament, with in their courses, the stationary lights at different times of the year, and the lining up and the spiritual significance of those alignments. And the gentleman that was speaking at the Truth Movement a couple of weeks ago, I think it would be now, no, a week ago, mentioned that there was an astrological alignment coming next year in August. I don't know whether there's any, I don't follow astrology, so I wouldn't know that. But maybe somebody who follows astrology and listens would be able to confirm it. An important alignment of what they call the planets, I suppose. I mean, the talk itself was all about the Aquarian age. So it's all about, looking at the stars. But, the Bible does tell us, what does it call them? Ye prognosticators, and mentions using the stars to predict the future, and using, sort of man-made rituals, divination and all this sort of business, which is very popular now. There's, I've noticed there are 3 or 4 women on the local group offering psychic readings and tarot readings and astrological this, that and the other. And one of them said that she has psychic powers, or she is a psychic. And, there were women signing up to join her classes. Women. I didn't see any men owning up to it. Or to have one-on-one, I suppose. You'd probably pay a decent fee to do that. Maybe not a lot. The local spiritual church apparently would or used to give a healing, but they wanted £5 for it. That was the cost. Maybe those things work. I don't know. There was a lady that came to the Truth Movement who everybody swore had these kind of, is it called pranotherapy? I was able to heal with her just by laying on of hands. And there was a lot of anecdotal evidence for her ability in this regard. She was an unprepossessing person, really, not didn't seem outwardly charismatic or anything, but I didn't really get to know her. I wish I had now. So all these things do exist, don't they? All these alignments, and then this strange architecture around the world, and that we can't explain. You see, what I'm sure other people have done this. You start looking at buildings. I mean, even here in Birmingham, most of the older buildings in the city are far beyond the technical ability, really, of modern craftsmen, or really beyond it, because once you start looking at the mathematical precision in some of these roses on cathedrals and details that are just repeated patterns, and engineers are left scratching their heads as to how such things could have possibly been achieved. And the world is full of these wonders. I was reading of a steel column, now I can't remember where it is, or an iron column that was claimed to be 2,000 years old and yet had absolutely not deteriorated. And engineers were saying, or steel makers, that they can't make that steel. It's higher. I think one of the highest qualities of steel is used to be made in my city, actually. I'll make that boast. Where they made qualities of iron, I should call it, where they make wrought iron, where they used to make wrought iron. I suppose that means it's worked in some way or annealed during the process. I can't remember it precisely. But it was renowned for its durability. And in fact, the wrought iron works from the Victorian era that abound in the city are all in perfect condition. So we can say that they certainly have no problem with 200 years, more or less. So there are these mysteries, aren't there, around the world, like Manu Picchu, is it called, in Peru, I think, when we see those stones interlocked with such millimetric precision. And again, we don't understand how those things have been done. It's out with our abilities, our technical abilities this day. And even if we were to speak of the Crystal Castle, Coral Castle, which I think is in Florida or somewhere in the States. Coral Castle. I think I might have. It may be in Florida. It's somewhere there. I've never been to America. I'd like to go down to Florida and have a look at the Keys. I think that'd be really cool. But the guy that built that castle single-handed and shifting stones that weigh upwards of 8 or 9 tons. And people couldn't really understand how he'd done it, and it was suggested that he was using an esoteric technique to levitate these stones. And then there's all sorts of discussion about this issue, of course. There's the skeptics who will just start explaining the force of leverage and so on and so forth. But the feat really, it doesn't really stand up to scrutiny. Like the idea that they moved the stones of Stonehenge down from Wales and covered about 300 miles with them. That hasn't been done in living memory. A feat of that. I think it could probably be done today. Probably, I'm not 100% sure even of that. I mean, there are limits to heavy loads, aren't there? I suppose you could do it. They've got a sample stone down at Stonehenge. You see it when you go in and it's laid on its side. And I read the plaque, and it's like basically paper mache. It's not stone at all. It's just the appearance of a stone. And you begin to wonder, really, the stones themselves, how authentic are they? But that's classified as prehistoric, so any man listening to me, I'm sure, could make Stonehenge for himself if he had enough help. He wouldn't need to be Leonardo da Vinci, would you? Just get some stones and stand them on end. The bigger the better. It's not difficult, surely. Um, but if you had to build, the Duomo di Milano or something like that, you'd be in trouble, Or look at the sculpture that we find, some of the sculpture that we find down in Naples with the veil over the face of Christ and his face below it, in all apparently worked in marble by a craftsman. And it's photographic, it's the texture, everything is so perfect. I'm sure people have seen it. Or the Release from Deception, where we see that man climbing out of a fisherman's net, which is what I think we are doing at the moment, actually. I think it's called The Release from Deception, that painting, that not painting, that sculpture, and it's down in Naples also, in a church near Naples, or perhaps a bigger, maybe it's a cathedral, who can say? I'm not even sure what a cathedral is. I know you sometimes have to pay to go in them in this country, which is a travesty. But I can't be bothered to go to the desk and argue it. Anyway, so those things have to be worked out, we have to account for them somehow. The Tartaria business, when we find things like in Australia, apparently, and I found out this the other day, there were the main kind of the huge buildings that there are in the capitals, in the main cities of Australia, particularly along the most inhabited Melbourne and Sydney and these sorts of areas. I don't know about Darwin, but the standard sort of Australian stuff. They're just such huge buildings, and the dates of the buildings, when you look at the kind of supposed migration to Australia or deportation of criminals, fancy that. This is just fantasy, isn't it? It's all fantasy. None of it is true, because there weren't enough people to make those buildings. They're too grandiose, and there would be no need for them. Initially, you'd wait until you'd assembled, I suppose, enough workers and enough people to tell them what to do. They're never lacking. So, the deception that surrounds us is absolutely 360 degrees. This is the problem, you see. And the more you look at it, the more you understand it. The biblical understanding of this has to be the fallen angels. There's no other possible artificer. And the fallen angels, of course, and their kin, their race, because they joined with the daughters of men. And so we live among literal fallen angels, the offspring of fallen angels. I don't know, how many there are, but they must be here because they're described in the Bible, aren't they? I think they survived the flood. I think there's quite a bit of evidence for that, but I would have to look more closely into it. But it seems to me that this is the power that's been, if not in person, this is the power that has been appealed to by the sorcerers and the devotees. The power, the abilities that of angelic beings. So they're far above, in a way, in the physical realm, the abilities of man, because they're angels, so they can harness a supernatural power, apparently. I don't know, what they have to do to harness it. You might say, some people could say that they might have to feed on the blood of young children. I mean, I hardly think that would be appropriate, but I mean, such claims are sometimes made, and they're presented to us somewhat in the movies, aren't they? So it's a meme, if you like, and the truthfulness of that meme remains to be exposed. But of course, if it were truthful, it would be a very hateful thing, would it not, to be involved in? It seems to me, whatever powers it might give you, it wouldn't be worth it, would it? You just wouldn't want to do something like that. But apparently, in olden days and in the Bible, the sacrifice of a firstborn was a regular occurrence, you see, among these mystical beliefs. And they haven't changed. And this is the problem with the New Agers. Okay, they follow these rabbit trails, and they're right to follow them. I'm not saying they're not, but they just go on forever, you see. So you can take a shortcut and read about the fallen angels and understand that this is, a spiritual war that we're fighting, and these would be our enemy, I suppose. And what is real and what is unreal, you will never hope to understand it, because their subtlety is far in excess of your imaginations. So if something is old, or if something is new, or if basically we are always arguing amongst ourselves whether it's old or new. Are the pyramids new buildings? Oh, no, no, no. I mean, you'll find evidence all over the place for these theories. And you wonder whether very clever individuals haven't planted it sometimes. They might do that, you see. That's the problem with trying to second guess fallen angels. You're not going to be able to do it, ultimately. You're not bright enough without becoming one of them. You can do that. But why would you do it when you have eternal life in Jesus Christ at your fingertips? God bless.